Well, the college football landscape is getting crazier and crazier as we go through it. And we're going to talk about where we sit right now as far as top 25 and talk about the programs when we get to them and seeing really where they stand. Let's get straight into this video without further delay. All right, you can see this top 25 right here. Number one, I'm keeping Texas up there. I just believe that Texas is the best team in America at this moment. It's not a slide on Oregon. Oregon has the best win. I just definitely think that that defense at Oregon is not exactly to the level as Texas is. I think Texas would be able to score with Oregon. A lot of people think that Oregon should be number one. I understand it. That's a debate that I'm okay with. I'm going to rank Texas number one, excuse me. Number two, the Oregon Ducks, big time win. They proved to everybody that their problems early on in the season are fixed for the most part. And at the end of the day, they have the best, at least home win that anybody has. And you can't do anything but give them credit there. Number three, Penn State. I'm a little bit worried about Penn State, like as far as being able to go to the Big Ten championship, beating Ohio State in a couple of weeks. But I definitely think that they took steps in the right direction, having to lean on Drew Aller to be able to win that football game when the defense wasn't really clicking there. They let USC run the football on them. They couldn't run the ball very effectively themselves. But Drew Aller and Tyler Warren found something that Penn State really hasn't had the last couple of years. Now, they still need to find some perimeter threats outside of Tyler Warren, though, because I can tell you they're not getting 17 and 217 out of Tyler Warren against the Ohio State Buckeyes, against even some other teams that they're going to see later on in the schedule. I know their schedule's pretty weak, but I'm just saying you're not going to get that production every single week. Big-time performance in a big game for Tyler Warren. That's not going to be something that's replicable. Shout out, though, to Penn State, finding a way to win that game, come back and win that game. But if you are going to reward Penn State for just winning football games, why can't you reward Miami too? Cam Ward is finding ways to win these games late and kind of forgotten about being on a bye week this week. But this Miami team, they're finding ways to win football games. They're going to have another tough test going on the road to Louisville this upcoming week. And if they can get through that, they're going to be looking down the barrel of their schedule thinking that there isn't a situation we cannot conquer the rest of the year based on the fact that we did fall behind by 25 against Cal. We did almost lose that game against Virginia Tech. And if they can beat Louisville on the road now, it shows too that they can win in a relatively tough environment for what they're going to face in the ACC. I like Miami right now. They're winning games. And number 5, Ohio State hasn't won all their games. Look, for as much as people want to rank Ohio State above Miami, they're going to talk about who Miami hasn't played and how close they came to losing. Ohio State hasn't played anybody really all that impressive. Their best win right now is Iowa, who I think is still a decent team. But they lost, granted, by 1 on the road. And I'm sure Miami would probably lose to Oregon too, by probably more. But you have more data there to be able to support that Miami belongs above the Ohio State Buckeyes just simply because of the fact that they're taking care of business and beating these teams, while Ohio State does have that knock on their resume and they don't have the top-end resume to be able to boost it. And now when you look at Ohio State, the pressure is very much on for them to win at Penn State, because without that Penn State win, you are taking the power of the college football playoff and putting it into that committee's hands rather than your own. And Ohio State needs it to be in their own hands. Their impressive wins potentially down the stretch outside of Penn State are only Indiana and Michigan. And you can see down the list, I do not have Michigan ranked. I don't think they're a great team. So, and the expectation is to beat Michigan at Ohio State. If Indiana is your best win, you're risking not making the playoff. More on Indiana in a little bit. Number 6, Georgia, big time game at Texas. If they can find a way to right a lot of wrongs from these last few weeks and beat Texas on the road in Austin, people are going to quickly forget that Mississippi State hung 31 on Georgia, that Alabama ran roughshod over them in the first half, and they ended up coming back just to lose the lead in what seemed to be 15 seconds. I think it was 15 seconds of game time. And then the struggle against Kentucky as well. People are going to quickly forget that stuff if they're able to beat Texas and Austin this weekend. Number 7, I got BYU. Look, we cannot be underestimating and underrating what BYU has done this year. If you take a look at the top 25 that we have here, you could look over towards the back of it and see that BYU has a win on the road at SMU, who I ranked number 21. BYU has a dominant victory at home against Kansas State. They also were able to beat Arizona this weekend, and they pulled away in blowout fashion in a similar way that they beat Kansas State, showing that their way of winning right now is at the very least replicable, but certainly looking to be sustainable. Now, we'll see if BYU can keep this up, but their resume is better than an Iowa State, which is why they get the nod here. And I put Clemson there at 8 because I do believe that this offense has really turned up a new gear, but that separation between Clemson and Iowa State is paper thin. And I think Iowa State had a really good win on the road against West Virginia, but West Virginia may just be a team that is just very average within the Big 12. And then they beat an Iowa team and had to come back to do it, who you don't see in this top 25 because they did also get blown out at Ohio State, who, granted, obviously, top 5 team in everybody's poll, top 4 in most people's polls. I think that this Iowa State's really good, have a lot to prove here. And I think right now you got to reward resume, even if you believe that neither of those teams are the best, top 10 teams. I think you got to reward wins. I think you got to reward resume a little bit. And you got to look at the eye test too and realize that when you watch BYU, their defense with LJ Martin back, now their run game, they fit the mold. They look like the right group. And then Iowa State does too. You know, against Iowa, when they nearly lost, they nearly lost because they couldn't run the ball on Iowa. Abu Sama really had his worst production that day. And then they were able to throw their way back into the game. Props to Iowa State for that. So they look the part right now, at least, to be able to be a contender for the college football playoff. Both of them do. LSU, big-time win against Ole Miss. We'll talk about Ole Miss here in a little bit. I'm still not sure how much to buy LSU here. We'll kind of see. I slotted Alabama at number 11 because I do believe that when they play later in the year, LSU right now looks like a better team, and LSU is going to win that game. And right now, I'm very 50-50 on who I'm going to pick between Alabama and Tennessee. The home field advantage of Neyland Stadium and the talent that they have on that Tennessee defense, the ability that they have to run the football, that gives me encouragement that Tennessee can win this game. But the thing that Alabama has struggled with the last couple of weeks is quarterbacks extending plays and being playmakers. And we need to see that from Nico Iamaleava for them to win that game. So we will see. That'll sort itself out this weekend between number 11 Alabama and number 12 Tennessee. And yes, I do have them much lower than a lot of other teams because I'm sorry, BYU has played similar competition to Vanderbilt. Iowa State has played similar competition to Vanderbilt, and they haven't lost. Just saying. That bad loss really rings true for me with Alabama. And then Tennessee also kind of has a bad loss too to Arkansas. Notre Dame right above Texas A&M, right where they should be. I thought when those two played, they were very evenly matched, but I will give Notre Dame a lot of props. I was once on record saying that that's an unforgivable loss against Northern Illinois. They still don't really have a tough schedule. I mean, they got to play USC. They're playing both Army and Navy on neutral sites. So I guess those are going to be their last 2 ranked games. But for the most part here, Notre Dame looks like they're playing better football. We just got to see it through the duration of the season. I am telling you right now, though, if they lose another game, they better not sniff this playoff. Number 14, Texas A&M looks like they also turned a corner since that Notre Dame game. I would love to see that rematch with the way that it looked like that wide receiver core, Connor Wegman, and that offense was able to click against a team like Missouri. Number 15, Ole Miss. Another tough loss, man, and this is why you can't screw around and lose to unranked Kentucky. And we saw Again, Vanderbilt much better than we thought they would be, but we saw that Kentucky's not very good when they got blown out against South Carolina and lost to Vanderbilt this weekend. So Ole Miss had no business losing to Kentucky. I get Kentucky kept it close with Georgia. That said a lot about Georgia at that time too. Ole Miss had no business losing to Kentucky. They let that one get away. So their margin for error, which is what I'm scared for with Ohio State, was very thin, and now it's 0. Now they cannot lose another game. And the good thing about Ole Miss is they have enough in front of them, especially Georgia, that they're going to be able to make up for this. Like they have the opportunity to make up for this couple of losses and the setback in the resume. But the issue is that is so tough to do. You're asking your team through the last 7 weeks to be able to pull off multiple top 25 victories to a lot of people. And especially beating Georgia is a very tall task. I think they can do it, but we'll see if they do. I mean, I don't have a ton of faith that they will do it. Number 16, Boise State, looking like the best group of 5 team. I am super duper excited for a week from this upcoming Friday. UNLV and Boise State play. If UNLV is able to stop Boise State, or at least slow down Ashton Jeanty and beat them, which right now UNLV very much looks like they have the capabilities. You saw Boise State look a little bit vulnerable. Maddox Madsen did not play great against Hawaii. And then you keep seeing this UNLV offense click under Hajj-Malik Williams. And I think that a lot of people need to really give that game that's going to be on Friday night at 10:30 p.m. Eastern on CBS Sports Network on the 25th of October. That game needs a lot more love from the college football media because UNLV is a legit contender. And then most importantly, if UNLV wins this game or if they somehow split, that's going to open the door to my number 24, number 25 team, Army and Navy, to be able to crack into the college football playoff. And what a great year, by the way, would it be for SMU to be in the group of 5 right now, because they would be right in the mix too. And you'd have 5 teams vying for one spot. But right now it looks like 4, 2 from the Mountain West, 2 from the American. There is still like an outside chance for a couple of other teams, but that's generally the way I'm seeing it. And to be honest with you, as much as I love the feel-good story of Army and Navy, they really haven't played much of anybody. The most impressive win between the two of them was Navy getting after Memphis. But what I have been impressed by those two teams is the dominant fashion that they've been able to win football games, Army and Navy. And so good thing is, like I said, both of them play Notre Dame. The opportunity is in front of them to get that resume builder. But I do feel like they need Boise State to drop another game to be able to get in that mix. We will see how that works out, especially if one of them were to beat Notre Dame. And then they would probably have to play each other twice, right? Which, knowing that game, they're probably going to split if they play each other twice. So a little bit of a chaos scenario there if UNLV beats Boise State. UNLV, of course, losing to Syracuse, who's ranked right above them. Let's continue rolling through these rankings. Number 17, Kansas State, very impressed with their offense against Colorado. Still want to see a little bit more consistency. That late touchdown was epic. It was very awesome. It was a great environment. Colorado now, they have turned a corner. I think my final, and maybe I'm overvaluing Kansas State here, but my final, nail in the coffin of the Colorado sucks, coffin is, look, they were able to compete with Kansas State. This is now, a 4th week in a row that they've been able to show a level of competency on defense and a level of success on the offensive side of the ball against good competition. I know Colorado lost, but they lost a really good game against a very good Kansas State team. Shout out to Kansas State for getting that done. Number 18, Indiana. I think the thing that is impressive about Indiana, it's not who they've beaten, obviously, because they really haven't beaten anybody, but they have not had a close game yet. Like they have beaten everybody by double digits that they've played. I still don't know how sustainable this is going to be. They do have to play Michigan. They do have to play Ohio State. They play Nebraska this weekend, and that's not going to be a very easy game. I had Nebraska right outside this top 25. And if they're able to beat Indiana, guess where they're going to enter into this top 25. So Indiana looks really good. Curtis Rourke had some uncharacteristic turnovers. Like, he doesn't really turn over the football, and you saw him do it at Indiana early. So if he gets that stuff corrected, they're going to be very dangerous, maybe a little nerve-wracking for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Number 19, the Pitt Panthers. They look really good. I thought a little bit sluggish at times on offense, but Cal kind of has a way of making those games kind of ugly and stuff. And at the end of the day, they won a defensive battle that they really haven't been able to win in the last couple of years, and still sitting there undefeated. I sensed a Pitt turnaround this year, but I didn't envision this level of success for the Pitt Panthers whatsoever. Number 20, Missouri. Big bounce back against UMass. They covered the spread. It was a lock for me. I really like what I saw, I guess, based on the circumstances, but they got to be able to prove it against somebody good. They've blown out 3 horrible teams out of conference right now. They got to prove against somebody in the top echelon of the SEC that they can compete like they did last year. So they got to really show their potential is still there, and they got to be able to compete. They play Alabama. They get the opportunities going forward. We'll see with Missouri. Number 21, SMU. Very impressed with the evolution of the offense under Kevin Jenkins at the quarterback spot. I think that their wide receivers are looking pretty good, and RJ Maryland's a really good player at tight end. They rotate in the running backs. They look good right now. They look like a much better team than they did when they lost to BYU, and maybe a little bit to do with that loss has to do with the fact that BYU is a good team. Number 22, Syracuse. They're lighting up scoreboards everywhere. They're able to beat UNLV, and I'm considering that a really good win, especially with it being a Friday night, travel across the country to play against that UNLV team. You hear all this stuff about these Big Ten teams and how they're struggling on the road when they're traveling multiple time zones. Well, Syracuse did that. They got a win against a quality opponent. Good on them. And number 23, UNLV, 24, Army, 25, Navy. I already touched on them. I consider teams like Arizona State, Texas Tech, Washington State, all 3 of those I considered. Since Washington State beat Texas Tech, I would have went Washington State, Texas Tech, and then Arizona State since Texas Tech beat Arizona State. And then you get a team like Nebraska, who I'm, relatively impressed with. And that's probably about where the line is drawn. I mean, maybe Michigan. I would have probably considered Michigan, but I still just need to see more from that offense. But yeah, so that's the ranking for this week, and a little bit of an in-depth breakdown talking about each team, kind of recapping what they have had so far and looking forward for these teams for their path into potentially college football playoff. Every single team that is in a top 25 right now has a path to the playoff. We just got to see it play out. So thank you guys for tuning in. Leave a like on this video. I'll see you guys in the next one.